I mean, in other words, you know, what kind of work are you going to be entering if you're going to be re-entering work, or a kind of what work will you be doing? And particularly, you know, since I look at many of the students here, I know you know, what your leaders, and so what will you be shaping in the future? And it's really vital for the faculty, you know, as well, because, you know, we pride ourselves as an AECSB school of continuing to look at our curriculum, make sure it's relevant. But if there are going to be real significant changes, we got to make sure that we do this in the best possible way. So the way we're going to do it, we have invited several guests to this, and our first guest today, I'm going to introduce in a minute, and I'm going to spend a few minutes, about 15 minutes or so, and just having a discussion. Some of you who have been to American Engages when we do face-to-face, this is what we do. We're going to do it in a little more condensed. Then I'm going to break you into subgroups, and where I want you to discuss particularly, you know, shape of business post-COVID-19, but particularly since we've got a guest here who's got a lot of experience, what questions you have for our guest. So we'll spend about 15, maybe about 20 minutes in subgroups having that discussion, little groups, and then we'll spend the last 20 minutes reading off some of the questions off the chat screen, and our guests will answer. And our guest today is Brian Schwartz. Brian's a partner and a senior partner in the PWC's risk practice. He's also on the Dean's Advisory Council at the Merrick School of Business. We're very proud. He's a graduate. He's an undergraduate degree, a BS in finance from the Merrick School of Business, and he's an MBA subsequently from, I think, Western Union, right?
Yep.
University, and he's got a lot of, you know, a huge experience both in corporate life and also in professional services or in advisory services. Previously was with, I believe, Ernst & Young, right? Before this, and the last 7-8 years with PWC, leading up their risk practice. He also publishes, and we'll discuss a little bit about this in our discussion. He also is a leader on an annual, it used to be a publication, I guess you do it electronically as well now. PWC do an annual risk survey where they interview senior executives about their risk. Brian has come around to the school. Some of you are in the MBA class. None of you probably, because usually it's come around to the capstone class, or that's usually the last class, is done a few sessions there. He also is an adjunct professor at Carnegie Mellon, so he enjoys being at the university. So Brian, welcome, and you know, being at the kind of core of a large professional service company, I mean, maybe it'd be best to really start this off by just me asking you, after I made one housekeeping thing, which Danielle, who always keeps me right, just reminded me. I'm going to ask you a kind of critical question just to keep going, but just one thing, you know, I think everybody's good, but just make sure everything is muted while we're having this discussion. Okay, thanks. So Brian, you know, professional service firm partner in this practice, what are the problems, the types of problems you're working on with your clients today?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. Excited to be with all of you today. It's interesting because when you're working at a professional services firm, like some of you may have or may be, working remotely is what we do. We don't go to the same place every day and sit in the same area every day and talk to the same people every day. We move around, we work from home, we work from client sites. So just in terms of sort of strategically how we carry ourselves during the pandemic versus before the pandemic, not a heck of a lot of change just in our day-to-day activities. But what change we are facing right now is all of our clients change, because our clients are going through significant strategic and operational changes because of the COVID event, that it causes us to bring them different types of solutions and work with them to solve their issues. and their issues, for the most part, are really revolving around the fallout of COVID-19. And I'll go into details when we're at that point about what those changes are. But I'll tell you, it's never a dull moment right now. I serve clients in the aerospace and defense sector, and I serve clients in the financial services sector, so two of our highly regulated sectors, and their challenges are pretty significant, like every other company is, because of COVID. So it's never a dull moment.
I do think that I mean, one question: are your clients planning for a post-COVID world, or are they still, sort of adapting to the changes? How do you feel about that?
So I'll answer it this way first. So we do, PWC, we do a monthly survey of CFOs around the country. We call it a CFO Pulse survey, and we started doing it as a result of COVID because we wanted to keep up with all these large companies' impacts and changes because of COVID. And if I look at our most recent surveying of a bunch of CFOs, these are of multi-billion-dollar public companies, they highlight 6 significant changes that they're facing both during and certainly post-COVID. Let me just rattle those 6 off for you. So one is really around workforce flexibility. Where you work and how you work is not only has changed for now because of COVID, but it'll stay changed probably for a long time to come in many respects. So that's sort of one sort of area. Another area would be companies are taking a step back and really taking a fresh look at their resiliency programs, their enterprise resiliency. How do they defend against issues like this? How do they isolate around issues like this? And how do they actually recover and become resilient because of issues like COVID? That's sort of number 2. Number 3 is around they're really increasing their investment in technology even during the pandemic because they're seeing the need to serve their customers differently and interact with their customers differently and deal with their employees differently. And all that revolves around the technology infrastructure. That's a big piece of it. They're also looking at new products and services just in general, because they all have a need to regrow their top line, because top lines really suffered during COVID from a revenue standpoint. So they're taking a fresh look at products and services to really drive fresh top line for these companies. And then the last 2 I'll mention, one is around, not surprising, they're looking to become leaner from an operational standpoint. And sure, that can take the form of worst case layoffs, but also around a number of operational efficiency opportunities, which we can talk about. So that's sort of a big bucket of area, which is around operational efficiency. And the last one I'll mention is around this whole ESG, right? This environmental, social, and governance. A lot of companies are using this time to take a step back, understanding what they currently stand for out in the public, and sort of tweaking and adjusting that to become more seriously focused on social and environmental issues and be impactful to those issues. So those are sort of the 5 or 6 areas we're hearing mostly from companies right now.
And I guess that's one question that I know that some students I've been talking to over the last few weeks and months who are the world of work, who most of our students, as you know, Brian, work. Am I ever going to go back to work like I did before? Right. And I know that is different by different industries, but I'm just thinking of a professional service firm like PWC, which does recruit our students. I mean, for you guys, what's your workforce flexibility like? I mean, is that an issue that you're dealing with?
It is. Like I mentioned on the onset, we do work flexible just for a living because of what we do, but we are challenging ourselves and looking at our real estate holdings. I mean, professional services firms have real estate all over the world because we're pretty much in every city around the world. Think about how much we spend on real estate and facilities and leases and things of that nature. We're challenging ourselves and determining if we can consolidate into certain, around certain hubs, around certain cities, and let people continue to work very remotely unless they have to be in the office. otherwise work from home or go to the client if the client has a physical location. So that's certainly impacting us.
And in these kind of settings, do you find yourselves or your clients are asking different questions about how you manage people? Because this is
yeah,
how do you manage people who are remote?
It's both. Again, we do that a lot. So we have infrastructure built to manage people remotely. Like we can measure productivity remotely. We can measure performance because we're constantly having these types of interfaces or having tons of conversations. But I'm seeing my clients really struggle with how do they measure performance of employees in a very remote workforce, because they can't track as easily productivity and they can't determine what they're doing that's good or bad or indifferent. So how do they give them critical or constructive feedback? So they're coming up with these new performance management programs to actually manage probably a forever, to some extent, forever remote workforce.
I know that I'm just actually seeing a couple of questions on the chat box here already coming up, and but I also see, as well as Heather, who I introduced you to earlier, a couple of other my friends and who are also in cybersecurity. This issue about enterprise resiliency. I know that last year you were focusing on sort of how do you get functions, to collaborate so that you get better, risk management in large enterprises. But in resiliency, to what degree is that about risk procedures, and how intense has the issues over cyber and cybersecurity become? Is that changed in the crisis? And
Sure. I mean, just to start maybe with cyber for a second, I'm certainly not a cyber expert. We have people that do that for a living, but I can tell you, if I talk to 10 different boards at my clients' board members, or audit committees or risk committees of the board, and I asked them whether it was a year ago or right now what their top 1 or 2 or 3 business risks are, cyber is always in the top 3, probably in the top 1 these days more than ever before, because of the concern. And quite frankly, the employee workforce that's working remotely is actually stressing cybersecurity and stressing technology infrastructure based on that alone. And then you add in your third parties and your supply chain who also are trying to work remote with you. You've got a lot of stress on your infrastructure, which causes nothing but more cyber risk. So cybersecurity professionals are busy today more than ever before, I'm seeing. Just to hit on resiliency. So when I say enterprise resiliency, I'm talking about a program that's more formal that the company has in place, which encompasses these things. It encompasses sort of business continuity management. It encompasses business continuity planning. It includes disaster recovery, which is more towards the IT infrastructure. And it hits crisis management and communication. If I think of those 4 or 5 things together, I think you move from those individual pieces to an enterprise resiliency program. And most companies have bits and pieces of those, but they haven't thought about it necessarily as one single program. And that's critical for every company today, because quite frankly, COVID is a risk event, right? I'm in the business of risk management. It's a pandemic risk event. That's what it is. And it used to be thought of as a black swan, something that would be high impact but low likelihood of occurrence. But we're not living with any more black swans. Everything's maybe gray at best, or worst case. So everything's going to happen. So pandemic risk has got to be something companies think about proactively, and the resiliency program helps them do that.
And I want to break people into groups in a minute, but I think that list of 6 is a great starting topic, and workforce resilience, workforce flexibility, resiliency, technology, increasing expenditure in technology, increasing the top line, leaner, more operational efficiency, and ESG. Yep. The one I'm wondering, which I hear and discuss, and I wonder where it fits, and what you hear is about re-engineering supply chains and supply.
Yeah.
I hear of intense supply chain disruption, and companies who are, depending on where they are in the supply chain, talking about how it's never going to be the same again.
Yeah.
On the other hand, some people are skeptics and say, well, it will all rebalance itself. So supply chain disruption, do you see your clients being concerned about that? And do they see that as something that's permanent?
Yeah, it's a great question. So if I think about COVID-19 and this pandemic risk event, that risk itself, in my opinion, sort of triggered 4 other risks to happen more than any other, maybe 5. So we talked about cyber is already, that's there for sure. Also liquidity of companies, / cash flow of companies. Another one would be overall brand and reputation of a company. And then the last one, and these are not in any priority order, the last one is going to be supply chain, because supply chain disruption is one of those risks that was triggered by this pandemic risk event. So many of my clients deal with a finite group of suppliers, and some of those suppliers, quite frankly, are sort of smaller companies, and they are going under, or they are shutting their doors, or they are slowing down. And that has a domino effect up the supply chain to the bigger companies who rely on them. So supply chain disruption is real, it's happening, and I think it's going to be with us for quite some time.
That's great. Now I'm going to give you a chance to ask questions of Brian. But the way I'm going to do this, it gives you a chance to talk to each other as well, which is partly about connecting. I'm going to break into small groups of about 4 to 5 people in a group. I had set this up initially. I have to say, this is our first one, so technical glitch. I set this up so that separate faculty and students, not because I think that faculty and students can't talk to each other, but I don't want students to feel that if you're in a group with faculty, that faculty are going to be, it's like a class and they're going to be assessing you. Unfortunately, we have a little Zoom glitch, which we're talking to Zoom about, because it seems to be a kind of a problematic glitch that our breakout group rooms disappeared. So I'm going to have to do this randomly. So you may be mixed groups. Our guests, who are our friends of merit, you're going to end up someplace, okay? And so introduce yourselves. But by the way, if you're a student with faculty member, you have equal standing in that group, okay? Your questions and your perceptions are equal to faculty members, okay? So I'm just going to do this. Takes me just 1 second. So this will be about we have 4 to 5 people in each group, and then I'm going to. Brian, you stay behind, okay? Because Brian's going to visit some groups, okay, as well. So you can, but he won't be able to visit all groups, obviously, okay? So I'm just going to do this now.
Hello. So the 4 of us can talk about, hey, the 4 of us. Hi.
Hi.
So I'm Danielle Giles. I'm the Director of Marketing Communications in the Business School, Dean's office. Been at UB for like 16 years. So, Dr. Nguyen. Oh, yep, you have your mute on. You're on mute.
Hi, I'm Huang. I'm finance associate professor. Have been here for like, since 2007. Nice to meet you guys.
Oh, we got Brian.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah,
We are so lucky, right?
We were just doing introductions.
Excellent.
So Dr. Nguyen just introduced himself. I'm Danielle Giles. I think we've met a couple times before.
Yeah.
And you guys are students, Ingrid and Audie?
Yes, I'm a student. I am just starting
Okay.
at the University of Baltimore, and I'm very excited. And I am in business administration with real estate and economic development.
Okay, nice.
My name's Audie. I'm a senior here at the University of Baltimore. I'm an accounting major, and my professor, Dr. Williams, actually encouraged us to come to this, and it seemed like a great opportunity.
Good, good. So the dean wanted us to kind of address some of the things that are going on in our world in related to post-COVID. So would anybody like to start? Like to throw some feedback out there?
Hi, Brian. So since you are here, can I have a quick questions like the job market change? And I wonder how the requirement for the fresh graduate from business school like UB, I mean, the challenge they face in the completely new, I mean, the new normal. So.
Yeah, it's going to be even more competitive out there than ever before to kind of break into the kind of companies you want to work for. But I'll tell you, I see most firms like PWC potentially making changes at the more senior levels to open up more space for the new folks to come in. Because quite frankly, we want fresh thinking, we want diversity, we want people who look differently, think differently, because it makes our firm more relevant to the client base. So I think new graduates are not going to be bad off. It could be a lot worse than it is right now. I think you'll see firms wanting to recruit you because you want to come in and sort of bring fresh thinking. Now, I think companies and industry might be a little different because they'll have finite space as opposed to the firms have a lot more recruiting going on. So it just depends on what industry, what sector you're going for.
Okay.
Just to kind of piggyback on that question that he had, how does a student per se at a school like the University of Baltimore kind of differentiate themselves from one of the bigger universities like University of Maryland or George Washington or a big school like that? Like how is the kind of the separation between those new recent grads kind of made?
You know, I think schools like UB who have a mostly a client base that has a lot of work experience, practical work experience because of what they've done before getting to the school, and they probably continue to work in some type of full-time capacity or maybe at least a part-time capacity. Right. I think that's your differentiator. I think some of these folks who go off to these four-year schools, they live on campus and they just do school stuff. There's nothing wrong with that, don't get me wrong, but being a UB graduate myself, I used my actual work experience as a huge lever for me to get into places when I was looking to get into a job after graduation. So just flaunt it and be proud of it. It'll make a difference.
Awesome. And just another follow-up question. Sorry, I don't know if anyone has another question as well, but just in the whole kind of like COVID landscape, how has the accounting profession kind of shifted in that way? Like, you know, it's been a job that you can kind of work remotely, but how is like the productivity, and I know it's maybe difficult to track it, but how has that kind of been affected with?
You know what's funny? I think our staff are working more hours than ever before being totally remote, because when you're remote at home and you can walk and get over to your laptop and get on video calls, you actually work more. which I don't like, because I want staff to actually balance their work life, because it benefits them and benefits us if they're more relaxed and more well balanced. So I think one of the negatives is causing it's causing associates to work too many hours, because you're on 24/7 basically. So to me that's one of the bad impacts of COVID for us.
Mm-hmm.
Oh wow.
So I've been back at home since March 16th, I guess is when UB closed, and we've been working at home. Some of the things that I've thought about, you know, the world of just simply shaking hands and business cards, networking and things like that. I'm thinking I'm going to have an electronic business card in the future.
Yeah.
And then what data risks are there to have an electronic business card? I mean, all these things that you don't want to do transactional things. I mean, just little things that you take for granted that the world will be like after this.
You know what's weird is because of my business, we have to go visit clients and we shake hands and we give hugs for people we've known a long time, and we do lunch and we do dinners. It's just weird not doing any of that stuff. Like so I've been working out of my house since COVID started. This Friday is my first client visit. The client asked us to come out and social distance in a big room to deal with some stuff. And I'm thinking, okay, I walk in there, I can't shake their hand. I have to have a mask on. I guess I can wave to them. It's just going to be very awkward from a business interaction standpoint.
The personal connections.
Yeah, it's going to be strange.
Yeah, and I mean, somebody who does communication, personal connections are important.
Exactly.
I'm thinking about what's my world going to be like from going on.
Yeah, for sure.
Anybody else have those kind of epiphanies about what the post-COVID business world might look like?
Yeah, it seems to be very tricky. Just from like a connection standpoint, you know, a lot of businesses based on relationships and how you connect with the person, like, you know, I think sales and things like that, you know, it's kind of person-to-person interaction and like making that connection. So like to distance that literally, I think it might be pretty tricky moving forward.
Yep.
You know, for me, it's very interesting. I do work full-time for the government, the local government in Frederick County, but I also do real estate, and it's been very weird how we do this. I had to meet, like we are meeting now with clients on Zoom, and you know, you're used to get with them, either have coffee or whatever, and getting very excited about buying a house or selling their house, and now it's just a distance, and but you know, it's happening. It's happening, and I believe that for whatever reason, we're going to continue because it's still not safe. Yeah.
Yeah, the risks associated with the life we're leading it's just some things you're still working through. We're all, as a community of humans, figuring this out, and what it's going to look like in the business world. Even in college, each college situation, each president has assessed their own risks to say what is best for our students. High schools and like both my kids went back to school today. One went 25% hybrid, the other one's virtually working from home. So these are all that leadership is making these assessments in a world that, you know, the information is changing by the second. It's astonishing.
It is. My son's a junior at university now, and he's back on campus. And so far they're doing okay, knock on wood, but he's starting to interview for internships next year, and it's just, everything's remote. They don't want to see him, they don't want to meet him, they just want to talk to him. It's just very interesting.
Right.
My daughter is a freshman now, and they are live on campus, and they keep watching the number of COVID to guess when they get sent home, you know.
Yeah, that's right, exactly.
Very much uncertain, you know. And some university, you pay for the room and board, and if you get kicked out, they will not refund.
I'm with you, I'm there. Exactly.
You know that, right? You know, very bad. You know?
Best behaviors. Risk of bad behavior.
Exactly.
Oh yeah. So any other thoughts, Brian, that you could lead us in this conversation?
I was, you know what, it's one of those things you have to adapt. It's not, the good thing is you're not adapting in isolation. Everybody in the world literally is adapting as we speak. So the ones who can adapt more comfortably and more naturally quicker, they're going to have the advantage, whether it's a company adapting or individual adapting. Yeah, all about adaptation.
That's a good way to look at it. Yeah.
So I have a questions, not really, not really linked to the COVID, but it is increasingly important under the COVID. So for like accounting and finance major, I talk with people outside and they think like these days, if you have some sort of data analytics or technical skill with software programming, it is kind of required in the very near future, right? Just curious, what do you think about that?
I'll put it this way. When my daughter's, she's done school, my son's in school, as I mentioned, a junior, I gave them 5 choices of majors when they went into school. And everyone had a technical aspect. Like my daughter majored in data analytics. And my son is majoring in cyber and computer science. So, and they both said, what if we want to do more consulting, like accounting and finance? I said, that's fine, but you're going to need that technical base to actually get that job and do well in that job.
Yeah, we recently, I got to do a tour in December of DC with one of our professors. He took his students to the SEC and the Fed and a whole bunch of agencies. And one of the things that the guy at the SEC was like, data analytics is one of the things that I'm looking for when I'm recruiting new hires, and having that expertise. So
yep.
On top of understanding accounting.
Yep.
So
yeah,
that's certainly an important aspect to the future.
Exactly. I'm going to leave this room just because he asked me to do 2 rooms. So I'm going to try to do the last 10 minutes. So thank you guys for having me on this one.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Take care, guys.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay. Who
Very
knew?
interesting conversation.
Who knew we would get the star? So, yeah, I think I go back to my point about like having business cards and personal relationships during post-COVID world. Things, and the dinner relationships and networking. We do we do this new networking event for our students, and you're shaking hands and you're exchanging business cards. That and resume changes is anything that's tangible, a piece of paper that you might exchange with somebody. Then you're thinking now you need more cloud space to hold all this information that you're exchanging between people. So think about how much more the farms we need, the computer farms we're going to need to keep the data in stored. Just think of all these things that are going to change.
That's correct.
Yeah. So how was the first week of school started? The virtual world.
It hasn't been too bad. I'm actually an online student.
Okay.
And this semester, I was actually going to have to take classes in person, but ironically, they're virtual too.
Okay.
I was going to be on campus this semester, but since everything's moved to virtual, so it's just a virtual aspect. But
yeah, not
too much of a transition for me.
Do you take online classes because it fits your schedule, or because you live far, or?
So originally, when I started at the university, I lived in Silver Spring, so it's a bit of a distance. I recently moved to Columbia, which is still kind of far, but about like 30-ish minutes.
Right.
And so I just always did remote or online, but last semester I joined Beta Alpha Psi, so it required me to be on campus.
Right.
So this semester I needed 2 classes. I was like, I'll just take them on campus, but other plans sounds like.
Yeah, everything changed.
It worked well for you, right?
It kind of worked out in the right way, in a roundabout way. So,
Ingrid, do you do online classes normally? Is that your plan?
Yes. I am transferred from Montgomery College, and I took a few online and mainly live classes. And now I need to be online. And one of the classes that I was advised to take is one that normally is not online. So I had the advantage to take it online this semester. And I hope that many become available online, because my schedule is crazy, and yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's
yeah, I mean,
much of our students
I live
have
in
that life.
Frederick, so I'm far.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a interesting commute from Frederick down into the Baltimore
Yeah.
City if you had to come to class. Yeah. Wong, how are your classes?
I hold on very well to the class, you know. There are some online and some kind of quasi, I mean, hybrid.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yeah, it's good. Today, I mean, at 6 o'clock, I have a class, data analytics for finance and accounting. So, yeah, he's the only one face-to-face I have.
Okay.
He's calling us, right?
Yep. He's
Yep.
calling us back in a minute. So,
Okay,
well, nice
bye.
meeting you both.
Nice to see you, guys.
Okay, have a good semester. Hope I see you again.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Sure.
You info on these. I think you'll like the Jack will take exercises.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Very good.
We
There's
did.
a few people coming back. Okay.
There we go. Hi, Heather.
I think we got everybody. So I think we're going to use the chat function. If you haven't already done this, if you could post, each of your groups could make sure your questions are posted. And I'm asking Danielle sort of to co-host this part with me so that I get equal. There's equal number of questions. Maybe I can start here. There's one that came up from that I can see immediately up. And while other people are sort of posting questions, just do this. I think this is, this is a good question. It's sort of a good follow-on, I think, from looking at these 6 change forces that you were looking at. But it was whether clients have used this time to reevaluate and change their strategic planning. Is there a reevaluation you see going on in how they're doing the strategic planning as well as what they're planning about?
Yeah, there is. I was literally talking to a CFO last, I think, Wednesday or Thursday, and we were talking about that very topic. He basically said, the CEO asked me to spend time with her to revisit our strategic initiatives to make sure they're still aligned to what's most important in this new kind of world order we live in with COVID-19 continuing to loom over us. So I think I'm seeing a lot of clients actually take a step back from whether it's their strategic planning process or just the strategic initiatives that fell out of that last time they did it, to see, are these well aligned to what we should be looking at today, given what's going on with COVID? So the answer is yes.
Good, thanks. So this is one. It comes from. This has come from group one, and it's they're wondering about the costs and benefits of where and when can work from home. Really work from home. I think that's it. It's rather than looking at the reorganization and alternative strategies. I'm interpreting this question a little bit, but are clients really looking at what are the costs and benefits of the working from home?
Yeah. I'll relate this back to a client conversation I had about 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago. I was talking to a CFO at a fairly large company who's in charge of looking at cost transformation for the company. And he said, because we've taken our employees and mapped them to different waves of when they would come back, and the last 2 waves probably are not going to come back for many years to come because they're doing a good job remotely. And because those waves add up to so many heads, they're actually looking at selling their corporate headquarters and going to a smaller structure to save money on just their footprint. So I think the big benefit is going to be, quite frankly, cost savings. Whereas a drawback might be Some say it's harder to collaborate, harder to work out of their silos, harder to sort of coordinate with other functions if some are on site and some are remote. But with the technology like we're using today, collaboration is pretty straightforward in my opinion. So I think those will be the changes we're seeing.
There's probably a good follow-on question here. It's already posted, you know, but so keep posting questions. You know, this is about training new employees for in the virtual world of teleworking. I think it's teleworking is what the group meant. How are your clients coping with that concern? I mean, how to train new employees?
Yeah, I was just thinking about this the other day because I think schools are going to have to start making sure students who graduate and come out to the workforce in this kind of environment are ready for this kind of environment. So I think the new students who never get to come on campus to a company and therefore maybe not acclimate as we used to acclimate by walking around and finding out where the cafeteria is and where the restrooms are and where somebody's office is, have to think about orienting and acclimating totally differently. To me, that's a challenge. And I almost feel bad for the new employees because, you know, we grew up obviously acclimating physically with companies, but they're not going to be able to do that for any time in the near future. So I think it's going to be very challenging and interesting. I just talked to a new VP of one of my clients who's a very experienced individual, but he said, Brian, I've been here for a month now, and I'm finding it awkward during all these Zoom calls because I haven't met the people in person. They all know each other, and I'm just a face on a floating monitor. It's just strange. So I think it's going to be hard for new employees to orient, or different at least.
And in terms of, you know, communication, this is a question which is probably quite germane to your upcoming study, the 2021 risk management study. We'll give you a chance to plug that as well. But how will companies change the way they communicate risk management policies to shareholders? Will this change as a result of this environment, or do you see other changes coming down in that concern?
I think one of the biggest changes we're seeing is I do a lot of work directly with boards. I do a lot of governance work across the U.S., across sectors, and one of the biggest things I'm being called about today are by CEOs and CFOs who are getting questions from their board in terms of, do we have to think about our risk management infrastructure or program differently in this remote world? And I'm being asked to come into board meetings. I've got one next week actually to actually educate them on how do they discharge their risk oversight responsibilities in this COVID world. Is it different or is it the same? Well, obviously it's different, but they want to know how to do it. So that's definitely risk management, tone setting, risk management, program activities. It's definitely going to be a little different in this environment.
And this one has the way it's expressed, it's from Heather Duggan, thank you. Do you think that this will change the way we look at globalization and the risks that are associated with it? It maybe followed from what you're talking about with the board, and I don't know, maybe it also follows from what we discussed before the break around supply chains as well. But you know, is globalization change forever, or is it change temporarily?
You know, I look at this pandemic risk event. To me, it's going to make globalization and leveraging, you know, international relationships probably easier because everybody's going to be doing it the same way as they do it domestically. There's no easier way domestically because you can meet with the people and shake hands with the people. It's going to be just the same whether it's in here or over in China, at least for the next probably year or two. So it might be a little easier in my opinion.
Right. So Danielle, go ahead. Sorry.
So I'm seeing in the chat, and it also happened in my group, we were talking about what's it going to be like for new graduates. And my specific question in my group was, you know, what can you get as a UB graduate to break through in this kind of atmosphere? And I think Brian had a good answer in our group, so I think he'd be beneficial for everybody to hear it.
Yeah, I just said I would do what I did when I graduated undergrad from UB. I mean, I took the fact that I had to and wanted to work full time or sometimes part time and go to school at the same time. To me, that was a lever that I could use against other new associates competing for the same job who maybe went away to a 4-year college and lived on campus and just threw themselves 100% into school, where you guys can do school and work at the same time. That's a big deal, because when we hire new associates into the firm, we almost require them to have at least real life internships and cooperatives and maybe part-time jobs, because we don't want somebody to come in and say, I'm not sure how to do this different than I did school. It's a different thing. So those of us who have real workforce experience at the college years, to me, have a benefit that they could really push when they start interviewing for jobs.
And that doesn't change. That doesn't change in COVID. That's you know, real life advice for going forward, whether it was COVID or not. So
absolutely,
yeah. Go ahead, Murray.
There's a question that follows from that, Brian, which is and it's by the way, it's from an employment, you know, one of our economists and she does labor economics as well, but she's asking you know, she's seeing a clear technical divide on the one hand between jobs that are able to be teleworked and better able to use technology and work from home in the future. On the other hand, not teleworkable jobs. So what do you think our future will be after COVID crisis? Does it imply that only the teleworkable jobs will thrive and the others will just not survive? Is that, you know, so in other words, the way in which the workforce, how is our workforce going to be made up in the future, and what the implications are for graduates on that?
Yep. I think, talking to my clients who obviously most of them are still 100% remote right now, or 90% remote, that they're amazed, and they had so many aha moments during the last few months, the fact that the things they thought that couldn't be remotely done actually can be remotely done, and done pretty well. So productivity takes a hit at first, but at some point you get used to doing it and you become actually more efficient at it. So I can't think of many jobs in the types of companies that I deal with, big, large public companies, that can't be done remote. Sure, there are some that maybe, unless you're physically somewhere, you can't do your job, but that just means your job description might change versus go away. I think adaptability from doing something physically to doing it from a remote standpoint, most of my clients are just literally amazed at themselves how well that's actually transitioned for them.
Yeah, that's you know, that's, I was just evaluating today some innovations in teaching among other business schools, and there was one I evaluated which was fascinating. It was a professional selling course where the students are required to actually sell, and they believed that it actually worked better in doing it in this remote environment. They were selling to retailers, you know, it wasn't this, you know, so that's interesting. There's two questions I'm going to get to, which are about cybersecurity, which was also a topic we discussed just before. They touch on cybersecurity and related topics. One is on a personal basis, and I think is well framed. You know, it's how do you manage and preserve trust in relationships, firm to customer, particularly in the context of shopping online, paying with credit cards, information security, problems of delivery. You know, this is a kind of an area where, and I think you said before when you were talking about that cybersecurity was one of the top 3 in board concerns, but it's also a kind of key concern of employees. And also I would say it's a key concern of students. If you actually look through the chat, there's a couple of previous comments on this on personal cybersecurity. So they're about trust and about personally working in this environment.
Yeah.
So how do you see that working in your experience with clients?
Yeah, I mean, clearly there are a lot of bad people out there that are really taking advantage of people and the vulnerability of everything being done totally remote and through technology and through systems, which is why cybersecurity and those who really focus on cyber are so critical to everything going forward for indefinitely, because of what's happening with the shift in terms of working more remotely with employees, doing it more with suppliers, doing it more with partners and affiliates and things of that nature. So I think cyber risk has always been, again, one of the top 2 or 3 risks in every survey we've done, and every board member and every CEO and CFO across any sector I can think of. And I just think that's it's not going to change anytime soon. It's going to just stay out there as the biggest business risk to being an ongoing concern as a company, and the biggest challenge to manage and monitor that risk for companies and boards. It's just not going to change.
And as a kind of follow-up question to that is, so do you see the risk managers sort of extending their platform or from a former military officer attack surface, so that it is wider? It's not just in the corporate environment. It's home, shopping, right across the piece. So you see them widening, where they're looking at for risks.
Yes. One thing companies are always dealing with is a whole concept of risk appetite and risk tolerance levels. I have clients who literally say they want a 0 tolerance around cyber risk, and I always say that's not even possible, because you have to shut down, because you've got to use technology to interact with your employees, with your customers, with your suppliers. So you can't have a 0 tolerance, but you can certainly have a low tolerance and manage the heck out of it, monitor the heck out of it. So the whole appetite tolerance around risk is really being centered today around cyber more than ever before.
Right. So I'm going to give, this is my second last question. Then I got one last question,
Sure.
just to we can use this, summarize it up. But again, it's from Heather Dugan, who, what will be the importance of the perception of a company's risk management versus the actual risk management? So will public companies do more showcasing of risk management, or to attract shareholders, or will they? Or I think, Heather, you're also asking the question: is it real risk management? So it actually is protecting risk. Heather is somebody you should interview. Okay.
The answer is yes. I mean, whether it's ESG related risk or just risk in general, that's why boards are asking us to come in and train them on risk oversight, what that really means, and how they discharge it in this world, in this environment. And companies are really taking a step back from the 3 lines of defense, where they have risk activities sitting in the first line, the second line, and the third line, to make sure the right ones are sitting in the right places, and that it's actually connected into a program that kind of overlays the company as a whole. And actually they make risk adjusted decisions, not just decisions around business. Everything has a risk component built into the decision-making process. So I think shareholders, investors, and regulators are saying, you always shared about risk management with me before, really tell me what you're doing and let us kick the tires on it and see if it's actually impactful and effective and connected to strategy.
So Brian, earlier on you gave your advice to students about, and that's usually how I end these settings. So I'm going to give you a chance to give your advice to faculty who are going to deeply look at curriculum, and this is something that students will be noting down, because when they're coming back in a couple of years as alumni, they'll be asking faculty, what did you do? So if there's one thing that faculty really have to be concerned about in looking at the world as is going to emerge, and they should be discussing in terms of curriculum, what is it?
I think I'll take it from two quick vantage points. One is sort of the relevance of how they teach and what they teach is so critical right now because of the remote teaching nature. You can teach some things in person really well, and some things are really challenging to do when you're not in person. You have to adapt and figure out a way to relevantly teach that topic. That's really important. I say that as personal experience working with my son, who's a junior at college, and saying, some professors are really good at this, some are not good at all. So you gotta be relevant and figure out the right way and what to teach. And I think in terms of what they're messaging to students in this environment, in the COVID world, I would just say, make sure that they go in to an interview, to their first job, and really show their adaptability and flexibility to work in any environment the employer wants to put them in, that they get it. They can still be impactful and relevant, even from afar, from a remote work stance. So that's what I would say.
That's great. And so, and we will have a chance to, I would make us, thank you very much, Brian.
Sure.
I really appreciate it. I'm going to sort of pull this to a close because it's 5 o'clock. I'm respectful of people's time. I know we could go on for quite a lot longer. We'll capture all the comments and chats as well, so that we'll look through these and pull these together. A couple of advertisements. Really love having our external guests here, and so we will be doing this every week. Most weeks we have a speaker. For everybody, next week our guest is John Worthington, and John Worthington is Director of Professional Services for a firm called Hire View, HIREVUE. It's a firm that's got a number of innovative solutions for selecting employees. I noticed on their website they don't like to use the word artificial intelligence. They're calling it hiring intelligence is one of the things they've got on their website. They've got a number of machine intelligence algorithms that developed over the years. Some very large clients. So in terms of just this world is changing, I think this will be interesting looking at automation of HR and what's happening in that world. And so Joan, she's also one of our alumni. She's an MBA from the University of Baltimore, and so that'll be next week at 4 o'clock. Another advert for our guests is that we do run a seminar on the topic that Brian was just discussing, Management 330, and I know that a number of students here are in Management 330, and Kathia Smith, who's our assistant dean, who's here, leads that, and so I will send you, and I will get Kathia to send you. We will have a day, a networking night or morning or both for that event where you've got a chance to sort of test out your skills with business people. So I'll invite our external guest to this as well. So that'll be that will be in October. Okay. So thank you very much. I'll take feedback as well. I got one feedback from somebody that they like the mixed groups better than the all student groups. So send me your vote on that as well, and we'll might try out different formats as we go along. So and be safe, and thanks for your participation. And Brian, again, I really appreciate you putting this time in. It's great to have you as one of our alumni, and I know how committed you are to the school. So I really appreciate that. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
Great job, Murray. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
Sorry I was late.
No, we needed you to be my interpreter at the beginning. I had to do it without you. Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Thank you. Thanks, Colonel Vega. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Jan, for bringing your group, your students. I appreciate that. I hope it was useful.
Yes.
And see, liquidity. Yeah, I was going to mention to her, liquidity was a kind of key problem still, for So accounting is still relevant.
Definitely, definitely. And I had a good group of students who were able to attend.
Good.
Great.
Yeah, yeah. You know, it's a. Yeah, I always tell, you know, that I tell, you know, my orientation, I tell students that the two most important things in business is that revenues exceed costs and that cash is better than a promise. And so that's my summary of your course, okay? So thanks very much for coming.
Thanks, Dean.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.